Wait, are you serious right now? The words came out in a low hiss, but Jaden couldn't hide the swirl of fascination in his voice as he stared at the alien female across the dimly lit cargo bay. Her scales shimmered in the overhead lights like some mesmerizing tapestry, each iridescent patch shifting through shades of deep blue and vibrant emerald in time with her nervous energy. She stood barefoot on the metal floor, spine straight, shoulders pulled back, her lithe arms crossed protectively just beneath a faint row of phosphorescent spots that trailed the curve of her neck. He had known her for only a few hours, but he already understood that the glow of those spots often betrayed her strongest emotions. Right now, they pulsated at a slow, rhythmic pace. She was anxious, and maybe a little defiant too. "I want to do this," she answered in a voice that vibrated through his bones like a half-heard song. The translator device embedded beneath her collarbone produced faint mechanical echoes that let him make sense of her alien tongue. He'd discovered her name was Salivi, an exiled warrior priestess of a race called the Zathari. She had explained it so quickly, so hesitantly, that Jaden hadn't fully grasped the significance of her background. He had been too busy wrestling with his own precarious circumstances. Outside, beyond the rusted hull of the crash-landed transport vessel, the planet's swirling sandstorms battered against the reinforced metal. Jaden and his small salvage crew had set down to scavenge essential components from old ships that had crashed here decades earlier. They were expecting mechanical leftovers, not a living alien artifact who slid out of hiding the moment they started rummaging through the dusty corridors. Now she had insisted on a show of gratitude that seemed so personal, so culturally important, that Jaden's entire team stood around them with wide eyes, half uncertain whether to watch or turn away. The rest of his crew, Cole, Myrna, and Vance, had formed a sort of ring, pretending to look busy while obviously straining to see what Salivi would do next. She turned her head, gossamer frills fanning out along her jawline, and locked eyes with Jaden. He tried to swallow, but the dryness in his throat felt like old paper. He knew the last thing they needed was a cultural faux pas, but from the moment she mentioned this performance of the grateful spirit, alarm bells had gone off in his head. He was no anthropologist. He was a mere pilot and occasional scavenger, scraping a living at the edges of the galaxy. Yet something about her quiet dignity, her determination to repay him for protecting her from a group of raiders earlier that day, made him hesitate to refuse. He felt an unwanted ripple of heat spread through his body as Salivi stepped closer. The translator on her collar hummed with the faintest feedback. "Let me do it," she said. "Let me show you what my people do when we are indebted to another. This is more than a dance, more than entertainment. It is a binding of gratitude. I must do it." Jaden exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of his team's stares. An hour ago, they had stumbled upon her cowering behind a broken console, cornered by two men from a local band of scavenger slavers who'd staked a claim on the derelict outpost. One had brandished a spiked baton. Jaden's old soldier instincts kicked in. He seized the man's arm, disarmed him, and sent him sprawling. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Salivi was free. She pledged herself to him in that moment, kneeling, pressing her forehead to the floor. He had insisted that she owed him nothing, that she was free to go. But she followed him all the way back to the battered ship that served as his crew's temporary base. The desert storms grew, raging outside, and they had no choice but to wait it out in the cargo bay. Now, caught between refusing and risking an offense, Jaden motioned awkwardly for Myrna, his communications specialist, to weigh in. But Myrna just gave him a half-laugh, half-shrug, as if to say, "Good luck." That left him and Salivi locked in a moment of tension that made his heart pound. He nodded finally, capitulating to what felt inevitable. She took a step back and slid her gaze over to the half-seated crew, as if acknowledging them as witnesses. Her alien limbs stretched in a slow, deliberate curve, and her phosphorescent spots began to pulse in a more insistent rhythm. Jaden's cheeks grew warm. He could see Cole and Vance exchanging looks that ranged from confusion to something else. Salivi's spines flared slightly, and he sensed more than saw the subtle shift in her posture. It was a transformation from someone cornered and anxious into someone confident and determined. Her slender tail coiled behind her ankles, and with each breath, the patterns on her skin shimmered anew. The air around them smelled faintly sweet, like citrus and smoke, an aroma that might have been part of her natural pheromones, or the residual effect of some bioluminescent secretion. Jaden had never encountered a Zothori before, and each new sensory detail left him more on edge. She began to move. Her hips swayed with a fluid subtlety, and she dropped lower, just enough to mimic the shape of a crouch without losing grace. One step, then another, the bare pads of her feet making the faintest tap on the cargo bay floor. Jaden found his eyes following the luminous streaks that crossed her shoulders. The translator didn't catch her quiet chant, some softly uttered word in her own language, a half-sun expression that rose in pitch, shimmering almost like the glow of her body. He was acutely aware of the rest of the crew, but no one said a word. The hush felt loud. Sylvie's head tilted back, the glow of the overhead lights catching the delicate filaments that adorned her crown. She moved in close again, bridging the distance between them until the bright turquoise of her scales was all he could see. Her hands, palms open, hovered near his chest, but she never touched him. Jaden's breath caught when she slowly lowered herself, hips swaying in a manner that left no doubt as to the ritual's sensual undertones. It felt personal, intimate, and disarmingly direct. A flicker of heat coursed along Jaden's spine. This wasn't a simple thanks. It was a cultural expression he couldn't pretend to fully understand. The drumming of blood in his ears was so intense he almost didn't notice Sylvie's quiet inhalations as she sank to her knees in front of him, her thighs parting gracefully as she swiveled her hips in tight, gyrating rolls. Every glow spot on her neck and collar pulsed with an enchanting radiance. A hush had fallen over the cargo bay as thick as the swirling dust storms outside. And beneath that hush, Jaden felt the electric tension of 100 unspoken questions. How far would she go? How was he supposed to respond? He swallowed, the dryness in his throat almost painful. His time in the Outer Rim had exposed him to a few alien traditions, but never this, never so fiercely direct. He was torn between stepping away and letting the moment unfold. He managed a glance around. Cole's face was beet red, eyes darting anywhere but at the pair. Vance looked half spellbound, half amused. Myrna studied Sylvie with a fascinated tilt of her head, no doubt analyzing the cultural subtext. Jaden's lungs felt tight. His body, traitorous thing that it was, responded to her closeness. He wanted to ignore it, but that hot coil of desire wound deeper with every fluid shift of her dance. She let out a breathy exhale, a whisper of syllables that the translator did not interpret. Then she slowly rose, pressing in close enough that he could see the faint swirl of metallic flecks in her black pupils. She fixed him with an expression that spoke volumes. This is a gift. Please accept it. No doubt she believed she was doing something honorable and vital. The memory of how she had knelt before him after he saved her flitted through his mind. He took another breath, trying to keep control. Before he could decide how to respond, she spun away with a whisper of air, her long legs stepping around him in a loose circle. She dropped again, this time arching backward with a fluid flex of her spine. Her tail brushed across his boots, and he realized she was forming a ring around him, using her body to create a living boundary between them and everyone else. He could hear Vance mutter a soft curse under his breath, presumably in disbelief. The hush among the crew had morphed from confusion to a kind of reluctant awe. They watched as Sylvie showcased each new movement, her thighs shifting, her waist rolling, arms stretched overhead in an offering posture. It was undeniably sensual. Jaden felt tension coil in his gut with the awareness that she was doing this for him. He fought the urge to run a hand over his face, an anxious habit. The rational part of him said to gently stop her, to maybe explain that a simple thank you would suffice. But he feared an outright rejection might be an insult to her culture, a spurning of a gesture she considered deeply significant. And truth be told, in the battered gloom of the cargo bay, with sand-laden winds howling outside, there was a raw, haunting beauty to her dance, an elegance shaped by alien biology and ancient ritual. Something about it made him shiver, as if her body were weaving a story of longing and gratitude that transcended spoken language. Jaden had left the soldier's life behind years ago, turning to salvage runs and contract piloting after too many close calls and betrayals. He had learned to keep his heart guarded, never letting closeness seep in. Yet, as Sylvie's gaze cut back to him, unwavering and bright, he felt a disconcerting warmth in his chest. It wasn't purely lust. It was something fragile, like a spark that might catch if he wasn't careful. After one last graceful pivot, she came to a halt before him, chest heaving, glow spots flickering in rapid succession. Her lips parted. She stared at him expectantly. Every fiber of him screamed for some kind of response. She sank down onto his lap, knees bent around his hips, her body practically melding against his. Jaden felt his pulse hammer. This was a position that left no illusions as to the dance's deeper meaning. She touched his chest, and her scales felt cool against his shirt. The translator on her collar hummed. "Your kindness is accepted," she breathed. "This is how my people reaffirm the dead ode. Now it is part of my life's vow. Where you go, I go." Jaden's mind whirled, not just from her closeness but from her words. Vance coughed awkwardly. Cole muttered something about checking the perimeter. But nobody actually left. This was too strange, too fascinating. Jaden forced himself to keep his voice steady. "Sylvie, you don't owe me a vow of any sort. I'm not expecting this." His heart hammered so hard it felt like it might crack a rib. He tried to ease her off him, but she stayed put. Her alien eyes locked on his, unwavering. "Then accept my companionship. You have shown me mercy, and I repay it with loyalty. Let me remain by your side, Jaden. Let me learn from you, protect you as you protected me." He exhaled. The entire scenario felt borderline surreal, but sincerity radiated from her every movement. She wasn't offering herself as property. He could see that in the proud set of her jaw. She was inviting him into a bond that, for her, carried cultural weight. With nowhere else to go on this wasteland planet, perhaps she saw him as her sole ally. He realized, somewhat sheepishly, that the rest of the crew was still staring. "We can talk about this somewhere more private," he said, though his voice betrayed a flicker of uncertain humor. To his relief, she rose swiftly, stepping back with the grace of a dancer finishing a performance. She took a small bow, acknowledging his acceptance. He stood, trying to regain composure, trying not to focus on the heavy tension coiling in his lower belly, trying not to wonder what might have happened if they'd been alone. Myrna cleared her throat, and Vance busied himself with checking gear. Cole offered a half grin, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. Sylvie's lips curved in what Jaden had to guess was a small smile. She looked at him as if to say, "That is how my people show gratitude." Then she turned away, picking up a loose scrap of fabric from a crate and wrapping it around her hips in a makeshift covering. Despite the swirling confusion in Jaden's mind, he found himself letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The next hours passed in a haze. The storm outside raged on, pounding the ship's hull, leaving them all stranded in the battered cargo bay with flickering lights and limited rations. Sylvie mostly stayed close to Jaden, answering his halting questions through gestures and the device's partial translations. From her, he learned bits of the Zothari Code of Honor, gleaned glimpses of the theocratic traditions that shaped her life. She mentioned something about exile. She had questioned her priest caste's decisions about warring with other species. Her punishment had been banishment. That was all she would say. Her luminous markings dimmed whenever he pressed too hard, so he let the topic rest. He was, after all, barely scraping by in his own life. Who was he to pry into the heartbreak of another? The crew tried to pass the time. Myrna coaxed their battered comm systems, searching for any sign of clearing weather or allied ships in the sector. Vance paced, tapping the butt of his pistol in annoyance. Cole rummaged for scraps they could turn into trade goods. Jaden found himself drifting to Sylvie's side, drawn by a quiet magnetism that snared his thoughts in a loop of curiosity. She smelled like wind and ozone, and her movements held a coiled tension, as if she was always ready for fight or battle. He wondered how it would feel to rest a hand on her shoulder, to run a thumb across those luminescent spots. The desire unsettled him. He didn't know her, not really, but the memory of her body against his stirred a primal flicker inside him. At last, the storm ebbed. The howling died to a muffled whisper of sand against the hull. They emerged, forging a path through knee-deep drifts, the sky above still churning with dull clouds. Somewhere in the distance, leftover scraps of ancient warships jutted from the desert like the bones of massive, long-dead creatures. Jaden's plan had been to scavenge what they needed and escape this forsaken place. But hearing Sylvie's shaky explanation that more raiders might be near, they moved cautiously, forming a protective circle around her. They trudged deeper into an abandoned outpost. Twisted beams, shattered domes, half-buried mechanical skeletons. The wind stung their skin, even through protective gear. Sylvie led the way at times, glancing back at Jaden to ensure he remained close. He couldn't help but feel a spark of camaraderie. The bond she spoke of might be foreign, but he sensed her sincerity. It was as if they had become tethered by the single act of kindness he had shown her, and though it left him uneasy, it also made him strangely proud. Then they came upon the signs of slaver presence. Bootprints in the shifting sand, dragging lines from heavy cargo. The crew tensed, scanning the horizon. Jaden motioned for them to stay low. Sylvie crouched, pressing her palm to the ground, eyes narrowing. "They are near," she whispered, her translator device echoing softly. "They have taken something. Or someone." Jaden and his team crept closer. A few hundred yards on, behind a half-collapsed dome, they spotted two men armed with rifles, dragging a terrified prisoner in ragged clothes. Jaden felt a surge of old anger. He recognized them as part of the same group that had cornered Sylvie. Cole cursed under his breath. Myrna's face tightened, no doubt remembering how close Sylvie came to captivity. Without discussion, the four humans formed a plan with subtle gestures. They had been through worse scraps, but the presence of Sylvie reminded Jaden how high the stakes could be. He didn't want to watch her forced back into the hands of these men. Sylvie touched his shoulder. "I'll distract them," she said, her translator buzzing. "It is my people they most desire. They see us as exotic. I can lure them away while you help the prisoner." He should have refused. He should have told her it was too dangerous. But time was short, and he saw no other way to save the captive without a firefight. So he nodded. She squeezed his arm once, then rose, her scales glimmering in the hazy sunlight. As she stepped forward, Jaden's chest squeezed with a mixture of admiration and dread. Her approach was swift and confident. The slavers spotted her immediately, exchanging predatory smiles as she raised her arms, stepping lightly over the rubble. Jaden tensed, ready to spring, but he waited. Sylvie unleashed a haunting call, her voice reverberating with that melodic quality that had transfixed him in the cargo bay. The men stood transfixed, caught off guard, probably expecting her to bolt at the last second. But instead, she twisted her body in a teasing pivot. For an instant, Jaden's mind flicked back to that personal dance she had performed. Now it was lethal bait, a mixture of elegance and cunning. The armed slavers advanced, eyes glinting. Jaden and Myrna circled wide, taking advantage of the distraction to free the prisoner. Cole and Vance took sniper positions behind a broken girder, covering them. Sylvie kept the men's attention riveted on her, weaving among the dusty terrain with serpentine grace. Their snarls turned to confusion the moment Jaden rushed in, disarming one with a swift blow to the wrist, and Myrna slammed the other with a metal bar. Shots rang out, the crack of energy discharges echoing across the dunes. For a panicked heartbeat, Jaden feared Sylvie might be hit, but she whirled away unscathed. Her tail whipped around, catching a man's shin. The captives scrambled free, and Jaden yanked them to safety. One of the slavers managed to raise his rifle. Jaden dove for the ground, biting back a curse. Sand exploded where the shot impacted. Sylvie let out a sharp hiss, launching forward with unimaginable speed. She tackled the slaver, pinning him under her thighs, her scaled forearm pressed tight against his throat. He tried to swing the butt of his rifle, but she grabbed it, twisted it free with a savage pop. The man gasped, eyes bulging. For a moment, it looked like Sylvie might finish him off, but she hesitated, glancing at Jaden. He scrambled up, breathing hard, pulse racing. He looked back at her. We take them prisoner or let them go. We're not murderers, he said, though a grim edge crept into his voice. He remembered the batons, the threat they had posed to her. Her glow spots flickered rapidly, reflecting the adrenaline surging through her. Slowly, she eased off the man, letting him scramble away. He clutched his throat, choking. Jaden leveled his blaster. You want to stay alive, walk. That way. He gestured back toward the outpost's broken skyline. Don't let me see you again. The slaver scurried off. The other was unconscious, courtesy of Myrna's blow. They disarmed him, took a few supplies, and left him in the dirt. The wind whistled, carrying a metallic taste. The freed captive trembled, tears cutting lines through the dust on their face. Jaden pressed the canteen into their hands, instructing them how to find a safer settlement a few miles out. Then the group resumed the salvage mission, hearts pounding, nerves on edge. At day's end, they set up camp among the wreckage of an ancient cargo freighter. Twisted hull plates offered some shelter from the wind. The setting suns painted the sky in streaks of ochre and violet. Vance and Myrna scouted for water sources, Cole tinkered with the engine of their battered rover, and Jaden and Sylvie found themselves alone near a fractured bulkhead. He handed her a ration pack, though she wrinkled her nose at its stale smell. We have little else, he apologized, feeling oddly self-conscious. She shrugged, unsealing it with delicate claws. They ate in silence, so close that Jaden could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. He watched her luminous spots pulse in a calmer pattern now. For all her earlier fierceness, she sat with her legs folded gracefully, almost timid in how she picked at the dried food. Jaden set aside his portion, turning slightly to face her. Thank you for risking yourself out there, he said quietly. You saved that person's life. She tilted her head, regarding him as if puzzled by his gratitude. We are bound. Her translator word. Your enemies are mine, just as your safety is mine to protect. He let out a soft laugh, an edge of bitterness creeping in. I appreciate that, but we're not used to bonds like that among humans. Typically, we help each other because it's right, or because we're on the same team, not because of a vow. He paused, trying to find the right words. It's just different. She touched his hand, and he noted the cool, slightly rough texture of her scales against his calloused skin. Different, she agreed. But we are here now. A sudden wave of heat built in his chest. He thought about that dance in the cargo bay, the press of her body on his, the slow roll of her hips. He swallowed hard, pushing back the surge of desire. It felt too soon, too tangled. She was an exile in need of protection. He was a man hardened by the galaxy's worst corners. Yet as the suns dipped below the horizon, casting moving shadows across her face, he saw the quiet vulnerability beneath her warrior exterior. She was alone, reliant on strangers in a land that despised her. Perhaps that was the seed of their connection, the flicker of empathy in a place where empathy was rare. Night fell, draping the sky in unfamiliar constellations. The temperature dropped. Jaden and Sylvie ended up sharing a patch of ground behind a partial wall, the rubble shielding them from the chill wind. He gave her one of his spare blankets, though her scaled body likely handled temperature extremes better than his. She accepted it with a gentle nod, tucking it around her slender shoulders. He settled beside her, leaning back against a piece of twisted metal, his pulse thrumming. Sleep tugged at him, but his thoughts were restless. He recalled the half-lost wars that once ravaged this desert planet, how soldiers and pilots died en masse, leaving behind these bones of destroyed technology. He wondered if that same fate awaited him one day, just another piece of forgotten wreckage. Then he looked at Sylvie, her silhouette illuminated by the faint glow of her markings. He listened to the slow rhythm of her breathing. Memories of that day's close calls danced in his mind, overshadowed now by the ephemeral tenderness that lay between them. Cautiously, he asked, does it have boundaries? I mean, do I have to worry about you throwing yourself in harm's way every time I stub my toe? She gave a soft laugh, surprisingly warm. You mock, but I understand the question, her translator said, the mechanical echo still jarring. The vow is not about self-sacrifice for trivial things. It's about belonging, about being at your side. If you do not want it, say so, and I will release you from it. She turned her head, luminescent frills rippling. But I cannot release myself. Jaden felt a pang of guilt at her earnest expression. No, it's not that I don't want you around, he confessed. The swirl of contradictory impulses within him was staggering. He wanted her close, wanted to unravel the mysteries of her mind and body, wanted to see that dance again, but in private. Yet the soldier in him warned against forging attachments, especially in such uncertain times. I guess I just want to make sure you're safe. You've been through enough. Her lips curved in a sad smile. Safety is relative. My own people cast me out. Yours might shun me too, if they think me a threat. But I will stay with you. She paused, searching for his gaze, her eyes gleaming in the half-dark. If that is what you wish. He reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed his fingers along her forearm. Her scales were smooth yet rigid, like the surface of a precious shell. A small sigh escaped her parted lips, and she leaned into his touch. For a moment, the desert's loneliness faded, replaced by the raw closeness of two beings trying to find solace in each other's presence. He let his hand rest there, feeling her quiet shivers, imagining how foreign his own skin must feel to her. Yeah, he murmured, voice low. That's what I want. But let's figure it out as we go, all right? She nodded, letting her hand settle on his thigh in a simple gesture of trust. The warmth of her touch seeped through his clothing, and he inhaled, fighting the stir of desire he felt rising. He reminded himself to take it slowly. She was offering connection in a manner shaped by her own culture. He owed her the respect to not treat it like a casual fling. Still, the tension coiled in him like a living thing, an undercurrent of physical hunger that simmered beneath every shared glance. He tilted his head back, gazing at the alien sky, noting that every bright star was unknown to him. Strangely enough, that no longer felt quite so isolating. They continued forward the next day, traversing more of the broken wasteland as they scavenged for parts. A strong sense of camaraderie formed among the crew. Even if Saluvi was still an outsider in some ways, she pitched in as best she could, helping lift beams, crawl through tight spaces to salvage precious power cells. Her agile frame and keen senses proved invaluable, spotting hidden caches and crevices the humans would have overlooked. Myrna tried to communicate more deeply, but the translator was rudimentary at best, so they resorted to gestures and simple phrases. Saluvi's quick mind devoured new words, often repeating them under her breath, a thoughtful frown marking her brow ridges. By midday, the group stumbled across a half-buried chamber, presumably once part of a command center. Inside, they found charred consoles, broken chairs, and a corridor leading to locked storage rooms. With some technical finesse, they bypassed the rusted doors, revealing stacks of ancient crates. Much of it was worthless junk, but hidden among the debris, they uncovered spare engine parts and power couplings that might fetch a good price or even help repair their own ship. It was a small triumph, overshadowed by an ever-present sense of danger. The slaver gang still lurked somewhere, and rumors hinted at corporate mercenaries sweeping the region. Neither boded well. Late in the day, they carried their haul back to the rover, dusty and exhausted. Jaden felt a throbbing ache in his shoulders from heavy lifting, but a glimmer of satisfaction sparkled in his mind. Saluvi trailed behind him, her steps lighter, scales dusted with a fine layer of sand. At one point she paused to rub her arms, as if the dryness chafed. He offered her his canteen. She poured some water over her skin, letting out a pleased sigh as the moisture revived her luminous spots. He realized her species might thrive in damper climates, making this desert a literal hell for her body. And yet, she never complained. When they returned to camp, the group set about organizing the salvage, discussing next steps for forging a path back to their main transport ship. Vance reported that the storm patterns had shifted. With luck, they could attempt a return flight in another day or two. That left Jaden anxious to leave before more trouble found them. As the light faded again, they decided to keep watch shifts, ensuring no ambush. Jaden volunteered for the first watch, preferring to let the rest of his crew get some sleep. Sylvie insisted on staying awake with him. The night stretched on, quiet except for the sighing wind. Jaden perched on a piece of collapsed hull that rose above the campsite, scanning the darkness with a pair of battered binoculars. Sylvie climbed up beside him, folding her legs neatly. A comfortable silence lingered. After several minutes, she turned to him. "We have to talk," she said, the translator giving each word an odd intonation. He lowered the binoculars. "About what?" She hesitated, her glow spots dimming slightly. "In my culture, gratitude can become something more. I sense you are drawn to me as well. Is this true, or am I misreading your signals?" His mouth went dry, heart pounding. He managed a small laugh. "You pick up on signals fast." A tilt of her head signaled mild amusement. "I have eyes," she said softly. "I see how your gaze lingers on me. I sense the tension in your body. And I feel my own response." Her words were direct, yet the timbre of her voice hinted at vulnerability, as if uncertain how he'd react. He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "You're not misreading anything," he admitted. "But I don't want to rush you, or push anything on you. I don't know how your vows work, how your people interpret closeness." Her luminous frills twitched, the corners of her lips curving in a small, teasing smile. "In many ways, we might not be so different," she whispered, leaning in closer. He caught the subtle scent of her skin, that mix of ozone and something sweet. "Sometimes, closeness is simply closeness." Without warning, she placed a hand on his chest, her palm cool and firm. His breath caught as she leaned forward, pressing her mouth to his in a shy, experimental kiss. The texture of her lips felt surprisingly soft, like fine silk. He found himself returning the kiss gently, aware of the ridges around her jaw, the small scaled patterns that brushed his skin. His heart pounded a wild tattoo against his ribs. He half expected his translator to beep or malfunction, but the device remained silent, as if respecting the moment. Sylvie lingered, her body warming under his touch. When they broke apart, her eyes fluttered open, bright with an intense curiosity. "Your mouth is warm," she said quietly. Jaden exhaled a shaky laugh. "So is yours." He cupped her cheek, marveling at the subtle shift of her glow spots, which pulsed in a quicker pattern. She pressed into his touch, letting out a soft, breathy sound that stirred something deep within him. Memories of that cargo bay dance flooded back, weaving a tapestry of longing. But they were out in the open, perched on a vantage point while the rest of the crew slept below. He forced himself to breathe evenly. "We should, maybe, continue this some other time," he said, voice laced with regret and humor. "I'm on watch duty, after all." She nodded, though her expression remained hungry, curious. "Soon," she whispered. He gave a small nod, and she leaned her head on his shoulder, letting the quiet companionship settle around them. The stars above seemed endless, and for the first time in a long time, Jaden felt something like hope. Even if the galaxy was harsh and the path uncertain, in this moment, he could cling to the warmth of possibility. The next morning, they set off again. With the salvage packed and the weather calmer, they reached the battered transport that served as their home base. The vessel sat nestled in a ridge of rock, half camouflaged from prying eyes. Its hull was pockmarked with scorch marks, testaments to rough landings. Cole and Vance began prepping it for departure, and Myrna vanished into the cockpit to run final checks. Sylvie assisted with the cargo, carefully securing the crates of spare parts. Jaden felt a flutter in his stomach as he watched her move through the cramped interior. The tension between them had only grown since the night's stolen kiss. Each glance was a spark, each accidental brush of arms an electric current. He busied himself with routine tasks to keep his mind focused, fuel readings, checklists, verifying hull integrity. Yet every so often, Sylvie would appear at his side, offering a bright-limbed smile or a shy question about human technology. He'd answer, mindful of her impressive intelligence. She was quick to grasp mechanical concepts despite the language barriers. And each time she leaned in to inspect a coupling or read a gauge, he felt the heat of her presence. The memory of her lips on his would surge back, and he'd have to look away, pulse racing. They were close to ready for liftoff when a crackle erupted over the comm system. Myrna's voice came through, urgent. "We've got incoming. Looks like 2 vehicles, heavily armed, heading our way. Possibly the same slavers, or maybe corporate muscle. Hard to tell from here." The tension ratcheted up. Jaden felt the old soldier in him snap to attention. They had to either stand and fight or make a break for it. Cole reported that the engine couplings were still warming. It would take at least 15 minutes before they could achieve the thrust needed for takeoff. That left them dangerously exposed in the wide valley. Vance cursed. "We can try holding them off, but if they've got heavy weapons, we might be sitting ducks." Sullivan grabbed Jaden's arm. "You must leave. They will not negotiate. These lands are lawless. Their only aim is to capture or kill. If they find me, they will." She didn't finish the sentence, but Jaden read the fear in her eyes. Memories of how they had cornered her returned in stark clarity. He nodded, mind racing. "Myrna, can you jam their signals? Slow them down?" A muffled affirmation came through the speaker. Meanwhile, he ordered Cole and Vance to position themselves outside the transport's ramp, weapons ready. Sand clouds rose on the horizon, 2 dark vehicles barreling closer, turrets glinting in the harsh sunlight. Jaden handed Sylvia a sidearm, an older energy pistol, though it might be better than her bare claws alone. She gave him a resolute nod. Within minutes, the enemy vehicles screeched to a halt a few dozen yards away. Armed men jumped out, forming a loose line. They shouted demands: "Surrender your salvage, turn over the alien." Typical scum who thrived on exploitation. Jaden's anger flared. He wasn't about to hand over Sylvie. A tense standoff ensued, the desert wind whipping dust around them like a swirling shroud. Jaden squinted, scanning for any sign of an advantage. The side of the transport offered partial cover, but the men's weapons looked powerful enough to shred metal. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the lead vehicle. "You have something that belongs to us. Surrender her and your gear. No one needs to die. We know how these deals go." Jaden gritted his teeth, stepping into view with his blaster raised. "We don't give up people," he growled. "Find someone else to rob." Laughter. The voice came again. "We have numbers and firepower. Think carefully, pilot." Sylvie tugged on Jaden's sleeve. "Let me speak," she murmured. He hesitated, then nodded. She stepped forward, letting the sunlight catch her scales, the brilliance of her skin practically blazing in reflection. Her translator crackled. "I will not go with you," she said, voice ringing with quiet authority. "Your cruelty ends here. Go now, or taste our fury." The men exchanged looks. A moment of uncertain laughter. Then the lead man leveled a rifle. "Have it your way." Gunfire erupted, energy bolts searing the air. Jaden threw himself to the ground, returning fire. Cole and Vance laid down suppressive blasts from behind partial cover, while Myrna tried to jam the slavers' comm signals from inside. Sylvie darted gracefully through the chaos, shooting in quick bursts. One of the vehicles roared to life, a turret swiveling in their direction. Jaden's heart pounded. If that turret locked on, they were done for. He sprinted forward, using chunks of debris for cover, edging closer to the attacking vehicles. Stray shots whizzed past, some ricocheting off twisted metal. The acrid stench of scorched sand hung in the air. He spied a gap. If he could just throw a plasma charge under that turret, they might disable it. With sweat soaking his shirt, he tore a small explosive from his belt, primed it with a flick of his thumb. He locked eyes with Sylvia across the fray. She nodded, understanding what he planned. She drew fire, stepping into the open to unleash a flurry of shots that forced the gunner to duck. Jaden seized the moment, rolling beneath a hail of bullets, then lobbing the charge. He scrambled back, flattening himself as a deafening boom shattered the air. The turret exploded in a burst of molten metal, sending sparks into the sky. Screams rang out. Adrenaline surged through Jaden's veins. The second vehicle roared forward, men shouting. Sylvie darted out, leaping onto the side with astonishing agility. She fired point-blank into the driver's compartment. The vehicle swerved wildly, crashing into a jagged rock formation. The men who survived tumbled out, some fleeing, others staggering, dazed. The ambush disintegrated into chaos. Cole and Vance advanced, guns raised, ensuring no one could regroup. Within minutes, the dust settled, leaving the attackers either dead, unconscious, or running for their lives. Jaden sucked in a breath, ears ringing from the blasts. His team was safe, scraped and bruised, but alive. The battered transport stood behind them, still intact. Myrna emerged, face pale but determined. "We still good to fly?" Jaden called. She checked the readings. "Yeah, couplings are hot. We can go whenever." He nodded, scanning the battlefield. Sylvie approached him, chest heaving, glow spots in full radiance. "Is it over?" she asked. Her voice trembled slightly, the adrenaline high wearing off. "Yeah," he rasped, wiping grit from his forehead. "Let's get off this rock." Within the hour, they lifted off, the transport's engines rattling ominously as it fought gravity. Jaden took the controls, feeling the comforting hum of flight beneath his seat. Everyone else strapped in, the cargo secure. Sylvie sat close to him, eyes flitting over the console as if trying to decipher the arcs of human technology. Once they breached the turbulent atmosphere, the desert shrinking away below, Jaden let out a ragged breath. Relief swept through him, along with a stirring sense of triumph. They'd made it, battered but undefeated. The jump through orbit was tense. An old starship of questionable integrity pressed to the limit, carrying a half-human, half-rogue crew plus one exotic exile warrior who was now part of their makeshift family. As they cleared the planet's gravity well, a hush fell in the cockpit, broken only by the beep of instruments. Cole and Vance let out whoops of victory from behind, high-fiving each other. Myrna grinned at Jaden, silently congratulating him on a job well done. Sylvie touched his shoulder from the co-pilot's seat, leaning in so close he felt the brush of her breath on his ear. "Thank you," she murmured, no translator needed. Her eyes spoke the rest, shimmering with relief, admiration, and a kind of wonder. He turned his head, and their gazes locked. The swirl of emotion in his chest surged again. They just survived a firefight, but the real danger, he realized, might be the quiet vulnerability growing between them. He gave her a soft, crooked smile, and she returned it, their foreheads nearly touching as the ship soared deeper into the starry expanse. The next few days passed in a blur of travel, patchwork repairs, and cautious route planning. Jaden's crew was heading toward a starport that served as a hub for fringe trade. There, they could refuel and sell some of the salvage. But tensions simmered. Word spread quickly in the underworld, and any slaver ring or corporate enforcer who caught wind of Sylvie might pose a threat. The Zothari were rumored to be of high interest for illegal trade. Part of him burned with disgust at the thought. He resolved to keep her safe, whatever it took. The others seemed to share that sentiment. Though they peppered Sylvie with questions about her species and abilities, they treated her kindly, eventually joking and sharing stories in the mess hall. She picked up on the banter, surprising everyone when she dropped a teasing remark about Cole's snoring, gleaned from overhearing them talk. Moments of laughter bonded them all. Yet beneath that, Jaden sensed an undercurrent of curiosity about what, exactly, was happening between him and Sylvie. They'd seen the dance, the closeness. No one outright asked, but the stolen glances said enough. He tried to maintain professionalism, but each night, he found himself alone with Sylvie in quiet corners of the ship. At first, it was a tentative closeness, shoulder to shoulder, discussing the day's tasks, or pointing out star clusters through the porthole. Gradually, the tension grew. He longed for the feel of her lips again, the cool press of her scales against his skin. And from the flicker in her alien eyes, from the subtle ways she swayed closer or let her fingertips linger on his hand, he knew she felt the same. Finally, one late shift, they ended up in a cramped storage nook. Sylvie had been helping Jaden check inventory, and the rest of the crew was either asleep or distracted. He closed the crate with a sigh, leaning back. She was right in front of him, luminous spots glowing in a low, sultry cadence. The overhead light cast shadows across her sculpted cheekbones. Mather spoke for several seconds. The hum of the ship's engines pulsed around them like a heartbeat. He swallowed. So, how are you adjusting? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer, her hips brushing his. Something in her posture was direct, unguarded. I am as well as I can be, she murmured. But sometimes I wonder if this vow ties me to you more than you want. He shook his head. It's not that. I want you here. The admission made his stomach flutter. But is that just because you're bound to me? Or because… She silenced him by pressing her mouth to his, sliding her fingers into his hair. The world blurred into warmth and sensation. Her kiss was sure this time, fueled by mutual desire. He groaned softly, leaning into it, letting his hands trace the curve of her waist. The edges of her scales tickled his palms, sending shivers through him. She nipped at his bottom lip, curious and bold. Heat flared in his chest, spiraling outward in waves. Everything felt amplified, the hum of the engines, the dryness of his mouth, her intoxicating scent. For a second, he forgot they were on a ship with other people just down the corridor. Then he broke the kiss gently, pulling back enough to speak, though his voice was rough. Are you sure about this? We don't have to rush. Her eyes searched his, reading the swirl of conflict in his expression. I wish to explore this, she said, translator buzzing softly. But I also understand your caution. He cupped her cheek, letting his thumb graze the ridge of scales just below her eye. I just don't want you to feel obligated. You owe me nothing, vow or not. She surprised him by laughing, a soft musical sound. You keep insisting I owe you nothing. But do you not see? I choose this. Her hand found his, guiding it to her heart, if that's what it was, a steady thrum beneath her chest plates. I choose you, Jaden. Even without the vow, there's something here. Her admission stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years, a flutter of genuine hope, tangled with desire and a longing for understanding. He exhaled, letting tension drain from his shoulders. Then he kissed her again, deeper, savoring the way her lips parted, how her breath merged with his. She pressed him against the wall, her slender form surprisingly strong. The translator picked up hushed bits of her alien language, but it was more moan than speech. His hands roamed her back, feeling the ridges of vertebrae beneath scaled skin. With each brush, her glow spots pulsed brighter, as if stoking the flames of her excitement. For a moment, they lost themselves in that intensity, bodies pressed tight. The hunger in him grew, fueled by weeks of tension, days of fleeting touches, and the memory of that seductive dance. She whimpered softly against his mouth, that half-musical whisper that made his pulse spike. He slid his fingers along the base of her frills, causing her to shudder. She clung to him, her breathing ragged. In that cramped, dimly lit space, it felt like the only reality was the two of them, locked in a haze of mutual discovery. Eventually, the faint sound of footsteps in the corridor snapped them out of it. They parted, panting, faces flushed, his with heat, hers with an even more vibrant glow. He coughed, trying to compose himself. She inclined her head, expression almost bashful. He straightened his shirt, breast still uneven, then gave her a grin. We should probably go somewhere less, public. She smirked in that alien way, her frills twitching. Agreed, came the translator's measured tone. They shared a conspiratorial look before drifting apart, returning to the ship's routine. But for the rest of the night, whenever their paths crossed in the hallway, the heat in each other's eyes spoke volumes about unspoken promises. As they neared the starport, the crew grew tense. They all knew docking in a lawless region carried risks, especially with an alien passenger who might draw unwanted attention. But the ship needed repairs, and they had salvage to trade. They had no choice. Jaden performed the final approach, coordinating with station control. The starport was a battered ring of refitted modules and patchwork expansions orbiting a small moon. Its blinking lights and mismatched architecture told a story of countless travelers seeking refuge at the fringes of the galaxy. They docked without incident. Vance, Cole, and Myrna set off to negotiate deals for the salvage. Jaden, still pilot in command, remained behind to run post-flight checks and guard the ship. Sylvie lingered with him. She had cloaked herself in a long coat with a hood to hide her more obvious alien features. If a curious official or unscrupulous dealer laid eyes on her, the trouble might be immediate. Inside the quiet corridor of the docking ring, she waited anxiously as Jaden concluded the last details. Finally, they decided to step out for a short walk, see if they could discreetly procure some essential supplies. Sylvie's hood kept her face mostly hidden, though now and then her luminous markings glowed faintly beneath the fabric. They moved through narrow passages, sidestepping drunken spacers and suspicious cargo workers. The starport's labyrinth of shops, bars, and stalls felt overwhelming, but Jaden navigated with surety. He recognized certain signs, knew which corners to avoid. Sylvie clung to him, scanning the environment with cautious eyes. They passed a small stand selling exotic beverages. A pungent aroma wafted out, causing Sylvie to tilt her head curiously. Jaden smiled, pulling her aside. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded shyly. They bought a couple of small fruit-like pods, crisp and sweet, and found a quiet bench near a flickering overhead light. She pushed her hood back just enough to nibble at the fruit, letting out a content hum. Jaden found himself captivated by her simple delight, the way her frills moved as she savored each bite. Despite the station's grime and the tension humming in the background, there was a fragile moment of peace between them. He didn't notice the man approach until it was too late. A tall figure in a worn jacket, face shadowed by the overhead light, came to a stop a few paces away. Jaden's instincts flared. The man reeked of trouble. Sylvie noticed too, tensing visibly. The stranger stepped forward, giving a quick nod that was more a threat than a greeting. "You from the transport that just docked? Heard you might have some interesting cargo." Jaden forced calm, placing a protective hand on Sylvie's arm. "We're not selling. Move along." His voice carried a firm edge. The man smirked, glancing at Sylvie's half-hidden features. "Alien in a hood. Real subtle. Don't worry, I'm not a slaver," he drawled, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I just keep an ear to the ground. Word is, someone's offering a big bounty for a female Zothri. Something about an exile who fled. Know anything about that?" Jaden's gut clenched. So rumors had already spread. He stood slowly, positioning himself between Sylvie and the stranger. "Never heard of that species," he lied smoothly. "We're here to trade salvage parts, that's all." The man's gaze flicked from Jaden to Sylvie. A cold, calculating smile twitched at his lips. Sure. If you happen to run into one of them, though, might be worth your while to turn her in. Big credits on the table." He reached into his coat, pulling out a battered holopad. A faint image flashed, a fuzzy profile of a Zothri female that could easily be Sylvie. Jaden's blood ran cold. He drew a breath, forcing a casual shrug. "I'll keep that in mind." A lie, obviously, but he had to get the man off their trail. The stranger raised an eyebrow, then slid the holopad away. He gave a short laugh. "Right, well. Good luck with your salvage." He sauntered off, hands in his pockets, clearly relishing the discomfort he'd left behind. Sylvie tugged on Jaden's sleeve, eyes wide. "They know I'm here," she said, voice tight. "This starport is not safe." "Agreed," he muttered, scanning the corridor. "We need to find the others and get the hell out." He gripped her hand, leading her through the labyrinthine walkways, adrenaline thrumming. The brush with that bounty hunter hammered home the reality of their situation. Someone out there wanted Sylvie. If they discovered her presence, they'd likely come in force. They regrouped with the crew as quickly as possible. Myrna and Vance had managed to sell a portion of the salvage for a decent sum, and Cole returned with vital ship components for repairs. Jaden told them about the bounty hunter. Their faces darkened in unison. "We gotta go," Vance said, hefting the crate of fresh supplies. "No sense waiting around to see who else shows up." Within the hour, they were sealed back in the transport, engines warming for departure. Jaden took the pilot's seat, tension coiled tight in his shoulders. He glanced at Sylvie, who hovered near him, anxiety etched in her features. He gave her a reassuring nod, though he felt a swirl of doubt. Where could they run that these hunters wouldn't follow? As they disengaged from the dock, station control demanded a reason for their sudden departure. Jaden offered a curt explanation about urgent business, ignoring the suspicious tone from the other end. The moment they cleared the docking clamps, he gunned the thrusters. The ship shot into open space, leaving the starport behind. Alarms beeped, but soon the station was just a ring of lights in the distance. He inhaled, letting the tension ebb slightly. They gathered in the cockpit, charting a course to the next system, hopefully a safer haven. Myrna's fingers danced over the NAV panel, inputting jump coordinates. Cole and Vance stood behind, arms folded, offering suggestions. Sylvie watched with rapt attention, though worry shadowed her gaze. Jaden reached for her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. She squeezed in return, a small gesture of unity amid the swirling chaos. At last, the coordinates locked in. Jaden initiated the FTL jump, feeling the familiar lurch of the ship as space warped around them. Stars stretched into lines, and they were hurtling into the unknown once more. A hush settled in the cockpit. He released the breath he'd been holding, turning to face Sylvie. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the console lights. "We'll find somewhere safe," he promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. She nodded, and he saw gratitude in her eyes. But deeper still, he sensed the fear that she carried, fear of recapture, fear of a galaxy that had labeled her a fugitive. He squeezed her hand again, silently vowing that he wouldn't abandon her, come what may. FTL travel gave them a window of relative calm. They drifted from the cockpit, letting autopilot handle the brunt of navigation. The crew retreated to their respective bunks or the mess hall. Jaden retreated to his quarters, too keyed up to sleep, mind racing with half-formed plans. Sylvie appeared at his door not long after, hugging herself as if uncertain. He beckoned her in, gently closing the door. In the cramped space, she lowered her hood, revealing the full curve of her frills and the luminescent spots along her neck. She inhaled, looking around at the sparse furnishings, just a bunk, a storage locker, and a small table. "You live simply," she observed, her translator carrying a note of curiosity. He shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Never needed much. Always on the move." He watched her step closer, admiring the way her hips swayed, how her luminous markings cast soft glimmers on the walls. She turned to him, eyes reflecting the overhead light. An unspoken tension thrummed between them, equal parts fear and desire. She placed a hand on his chest, thumb rubbing small circles through his shirt. "Jaden," she said, his name sounding exotic in her mouth. "Every step away from my home has been a storm. I do not regret it, because I see kindness in you and your crew. But now bounty hunters seek me, and I bring danger to all of you. Still, you let me stay." He brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, swallowing. "I don't regret it either. We'll handle whatever comes our way." He found himself gently trailing his fingers along the edge of her frills, watching them quiver in response. A small gasp escaped her lips. Her eyes fluttered shut, the translator detecting a soft hum of her original language. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. Their breath mingled, tension building. At length, she lifted her chin, capturing his lips in a tentative kiss. He responded with a soft moan, letting the day's stress melt under her touch. The taste of her was unique, cool and slightly sweet, tinged with that faint metallic tang of her biology. He slid his hands down her sides, feeling the delicate overlay of scales that gave way to smoother skin near her waist. She arched against him, a quiet whimper slipping free. The kiss deepened, an exploration of tongues and lips, awkward at first, but growing more confident with each heartbeat. She let her hands wander, tracing the muscles of his arms, the line of his jaw. He felt her shiver as his fingertips found sensitive spots along her neck. Heat pooled in his core, a primal hunger that had been building since that initial dance in the cargo bay. But he forced himself to slow, wanting this moment to be more than just a rush of passion. She guided him toward the bunk, their steps uncertain in the cramped quarters. He sat, pulling her gently onto his lap. Her thighs straddled him, echoing that first time she danced for him, though now it was far more intimate. They took a moment to breathe, foreheads pressed together, hearts pounding. "This is okay?" he asked, voice husky. She nodded, eyes gleaming. "Yes," came the soft translator echo. Her glow spots pulsed, bright and quick. He let his palms rest on her waist, feeling the subtle shift of her body as she angled closer, brushing her chest against his. She wore a simple wrap beneath her coat, and he could feel the ridges of her collarbones, the faint outline of some kind of carapace or layered scale over her shoulders. He traced the edge of that scale, marveling at its smooth, polished texture. She trembled, breath hitching as he ventured further. In turn, she slipped her hands beneath his shirt, letting out a fascinated sound at the warmth of his skin. They explored each other in slow, reverent strokes, two different species bridging the gap through touch. The translator fell silent, and for once, they needed no words. The hum of the ship's engines provided a rhythmic backdrop. Their kisses grew bolder, building in intensity. Soon, the heat of their arousal enveloped them, breath mingling in quiet gasps. They shed layers of clothing carefully, mindful of buckles and fasteners, laughing softly at the awkwardness. Each new patch of exposed skin or scale was greeted with gentle kisses, curious touches. Jaden found the bioluminescent spots on her neck to be particularly sensitive, earning soft cries from her whenever he brushed them with his lips. Her scaled thighs tightened around him, the friction sending sparks of pleasure along his nerves. He guided her back onto the bunk, bracing himself above her. The ship might have been traveling through the void at unimaginable speed, but here in his quarters, everything slowed to an intimate hush. She gazed up at him, luminous eyes reflecting a quiet vulnerability. He leaned down, pressing a tender kiss to her lips. Their bodies aligned, hearts pounding in sync. He moved slowly, letting the tension coil, letting each caress and kiss build the connection. She arched under him, nails grazing his shoulder, scaled tail lightly draping over his thigh. When at last they joined, it was with a careful, deliberate rhythm. A soft, trembling moan escaped her. He steadied himself, breath ragged. They moved in tandem, uncertain but guided by instinct and the gentle surge of passion. Desire unraveled the last vestiges of caution, until they were lost in each other, the boundaries of species dissolving in a shared moment of raw intimacy. Her spots glowed brighter, pulses racing across her skin in waves, and he could feel the hum of her quickening heartbeat beneath his hand. Each motion drew them closer, forging a bond that transcended the complexities of language or tradition. Afterwards, they lay tangled in the cramped bunk, bodies slick with sweat, hearts still thrumming. The universe outside the hull was silent, but inside, everything roiled with unspoken promises. Sylvie rested her head against Jaden's chest, her frills brushing his skin. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the slight vibration of her purring breath. No words passed between them for a long time. The translator remained silent. They just breathed together, letting the weight of exhaustion and pleasure settle. At length, she murmured something in her own language, her voice a soft lullaby. He brushed a kiss over her temple, guessing it was a phrase of contentment or prayer. He didn't need the translator to feel the warmth of her gratitude. A small smile curved his lips, contentment blooming in his chest. He thought back to the first time he saw her, cornered and terrified, how his impulsive act of mercy had sparked a vow that changed both their lives. Now, in this quiet darkness, it felt as though they had stepped across an invisible threshold, forging a deeper bond. Tomorrow, there might be more threats. But for now, they had each other. In the days that followed, they drifted from system to system, evading rumors of bounties, forging alliances with old contacts of the crew who owed Jaden favors. Repair by repair, the battered transport improved in reliability. Deal by deal, they built a small fund of credits to keep them afloat. Through it all, Sylvie remained at Jaden's side. The vow that once frightened him now felt like a pledge of mutual devotion, each new brush of hands or sharing of a meal reinforcing the fragile trust blooming between them. They learned each other's quirks. Sylvie's fascination with certain human foods, especially sweet flavors that made her frills vibrate in delight, or Jaden's habit of humming old Earth tunes under his breath when the autopilot droned on. The crew teased them lightly, but mostly respected their privacy. Myrna, the ever-inquisitive linguist, tried in vain to decode more of Sylvie's language, though progress was slow. Meanwhile, Cole and Vance occasionally gave Jaden a friendly elbow, smirking about the intergalactic romance playing out in the cramped corridors. It was awkward, comedic, but endearing, a bright spot in an otherwise gritty life. As the bond between Jaden and Sylvie deepened, she opened up about her past. She spoke of the Zothri priest caste, the centuries of conflict that shaped her people. In hushed tones, she recounted how she had questioned the ways of her elders, challenging the taboo that forbade alliances with other species. For that crime, she was stripped of her rank and cast out. A piece of her heart still grieved for the homeland she might never see again. Jaden listened, arms wrapped around her in the darkness of his quarters, offering comfort where he could. He didn't pretend to understand the complexities of her culture, but he recognized the pain of exile. By the time they reached a safer region of space, an independent station with a semblance of law and order, they had carved out a precarious sense of stability. The bounty still lurked, but no immediate threats materialized. The crew managed to secure a few legitimate hauling contracts, enough to keep the ship flying and food on the table. They even found a quiet corner of the station to rent temporarily, giving everyone a break from the cramped living quarters. A moment of respite in a galaxy that seldom offered any. One evening, as they strolled through the station's market, Sylvie and Jaden paused by a stall selling handcrafted ornaments. Delicate glass baubles hung in a swirling pattern, reflecting neon lights. Sylvie eyed them curiously, her hand drifting to her own glowing spots. Jaden felt a swell of affection, recalling how her luminescence had pulsed against his body in the heat of passion. Impulsively, he bought a small glass orb shaped like a drop of water, shot through with threads of shimmering blue that reminded him of her scales. He handed it to her, feeling uncharacteristically shy. "It reminded me of you," he said simply. She gazed at the trinket, wonder sparking in her eyes. A slow smile stretched her lips, and she leaned in to brush a kiss over his cheek. "Thank you," her translator echoed, though the sentiment ran deeper than words. Hand in hand, they made their way back toward the docking bay. A hush fell between them, not from awkwardness, but from a mutual understanding that this quiet interlude felt precious. A fleeting calm in a galaxy poised to tear them apart if given the chance. Jaden tried not to think about the future's uncertainties, focusing instead on the comforting warmth of her fingers interlaced with his. In the distance, the gleaming arc of the station's observation deck beckoned. They stopped by the massive window, gazing out at the swirl of stars. The planet below was a vibrant mosaic of swirling gases, a blue-green orb that faintly reminded him of Earth. Sylvie pressed close, resting her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, letting the universe sprawl before them in a silent testament to infinite possibility. He recalled the vow she made, the dance she performed, the quiet pledge they sealed with lips and touch. He remembered how lost he had felt before meeting her, drifting from job to job, haunted by old scars. Now, with her at his side, the emptiness inside him felt less pronounced. Maybe, just maybe, the bond they forged could endure, no matter what came next. As they stood there, the station's hum mingling with the rhythmic pulse of Sylvie's breathing, Jaden made a personal vow of his own. He would protect this fragile connection, nurture it. A future uncharted, yes, but worth navigating. He felt Sylvie's hand tighten on his. Her glow spots flickered, a bright wave that rippled across her skin. And for a moment, in that vast expanse of starlight, they both breathed in the promise of a new beginning, together, bound by choice, forging a love that no distance or danger could break.